we're just going to play some Warhammer right now because I worked pretty late today, so I didn't really watch any of the news or anything, look up any of the news, didn't read any of the news or anything. I did see one article about how the FBI has classified MAGA supporters as extremists and a terrorist group, and they're going to be looking into people like me, I guess. So that's fucking cool. But other than that, I'll probably get it more into that on tomorrow's stream. Today I'm just gonna chill out, play some Warhammer, probably not for that long, and then I'm going to go to bed after that. But I thought I should stream for a little bit at least. We're gonna watch a video. I'm just gonna listen to a video while I'm playing called The Philosopher's Iceberg, explained by Infinite Sin, I guess. And that's what we're gonna do. Alright. Socrates.
One of the most famous philosophers in history, as he was the founder of Western philosophy. In his young age, he wasn't actually a philosopher but a soldier instead. But goddamn, he became the questioner of everything. The Socratic method became a unique way of debating and clarifying questions. He didn't write anything by himself, but had two students who wrote his life accounts. Though there is an argument over which one is the true Socrates. Anyhow, the most well-known quotation from Socrates was that, "I know that I know nothing." Well, if you don't know about him, then you're probably following the Socratic path right. Plato. He's one of the two students I was talking about, if it isn't obvious already. He's famously known for writing the dialogues of Socrates, although it is said that in later dialogues, he used Socrates as a mouthpiece to convey his own ideas. Plato had a fascination with distinguishing between the experience and the ideal form, which came to be known as the theory of forms, where the real world is not the true, timeless world, but the shadow of the true reality of forms. These forms are abstract, perfect, and unchanging. While in his work, The Republic, he came up with a civilization ruled by the big-brain philosopher instead of a small-brain one. Karl Marx. A pretty big jump from the ancient Greek to the 19th century, but Daddy Marx returns with his revolutionary ideas. He was brought up in Berlin, got inspired by Engels, moved to France, became a revolutionist, and finally met Engels to collab and write the Marxist masterpiece known as the Communist Manifesto, which literally rewrote history as we know. He argued that the whole of human history was based on the class system, where one of the class struggled against another until one disappeared and the other rose. Ultimately, the proletariat will be the last class to struggle and rule. Also, don't forget about the Capital, where he tried to roast capitalism through empirical and theoretical evidence. But despite his effort, capitalism still prevails. Albert Camus. In a million years, a philosopher is born who actually, for once, has a high sex appeal.
I didn't mean to do that.
That is Albert Camus, or what I like to call him, Chad Camus. Born in 1913, he came to be the admirer of literature and philosophy. His debut novel, The Stranger and Most Writings, portrayed an isolated character in an alien universe who were to be estranged by their own existence. More specifically, in his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, he examined nihilism and eventually came to find the chaos, the irrationality, and the absurd. Thus his philosophy of absurdism was founded, where one faces the disharmony between the individual's search of meaning and the meaningless world. To solve the problem, there are three ways, which are escaping existence, religion, and acceptance of the absurd. Although it was truly sad that such a Chad was killed in a car crash. John Paul Sartre. The French theme continues with Sartre. He was small-statured and cross-eyed, But that did not stop him from being the leading French philosopher of the 20th century. His first philosophical novel, Nausea, which critics defined as a pathological case of neurotic escape. In his great work, Being and Consciousness, where he defined two opposites which were being and thingness against nothing and consciousness. Thus he came to the conclusion that if consciousness was not a being, then it was affected by the deterministic world. He said existentialism is a humanism, because human beings express their power of free will through it. He further stated that human created his own meaning through undertaking the projects in the real world. Well, time to revert my existential crisis. Level 2. Aristotle. And so it continues with the student of Plato. I mean, he should be on top of the list, considering his
Aristotle
contribution to
should
every
be on
aspect
top
of
of the
human
list. He
knowledge,
should not
but
be
I'm
on
too
level
lazy to
2.
make my own list. Most of Aristotle's work is considered to be lost, but what survives is divided into 4 parts, which is set of logical tools for philosophical and scientific inquiry, theoretical work over animals, an examination about the nature of matter and change, and a quasi-theological investigation of existence itself. I can blabber on about Aristotle for a long time, but let's move on for now. Immanuel Kant. The first thing that comes to mind upon hearing his name is to make an inappropriate joke, but here on this channel we are family friendly.
Diplomacy, trade, their offer.
Lie. His works were around epistemology, ethics,
Their demands,
and aesthetics, which
offer.
influenced the idealist school of thought. He brought philosophy to the new era of rational thought along with Descartes.
For sure.
Although his earlier writings and dissertations were more mathematics and physics based, but after developing his philosophy, he came to write the 3 critiques. His most important work was the critique.
Their demands, their offers.
Of pure reason, where he explained how reason and experience interact with thought and understanding. Though, in the end, what
Bro.
I learned from Kant was to follow the categorical imperative and investigate the limits and powers of reason.
Deals, bro.
But what I actually learned was to tie my wrists to the bedpost
We have
so I could stop
secured a
myself
number
from
of weight
wanking.
fragments in preparation
Thomas
for
Hobbes.
Lawmaster Talarian's ritual, yet
He lived an
more are
exceptionally long
required.
life of
We
21,
must act
especially
in all
considering
haste.
he was born in
It is clear that
1588.
Malekith's
And what's
minions
more
are
surprising
gathering
is that he
scrolls of
wrote the
law for their
Leviathan at
own
age 63.
fell rights.
The core
Time
idea
is
it
of the
discussed
essence.
was the way a man could abandon the natural state of fear and violence by giving up his natural freedom and by forming a contract with an authority. This authority was to be sovereign and absolute until it upholds a contract. This was the social contract theory, but ironically, the authorities didn't seem to like his ideas. I mean, he does look like the villain from the Saw movie. Martin Heidegger. Well, what to
he was
say
a
other
Nazi,
than
bro.
that he explored the main question of human existence through the concepts of time and death. His complex book Being and Time could be summarized in one word, which is design,
Use
meaning
your
being
armies
there.
to exert
He defined
control
an individual
over the
as a
theatre
mere
of
thinking
war.
subject,
Place
who is
your
radically
warriors in
different from
passes
the
to
world
control their
around,
use
thus
and study
cognitively
the enemy
isolated from it.
positions
The
to find
concepts
the
are hard
best
to wrap your
avenues
head
of
around,
attack.
but once comprehended, then ontological concepts of the world, everydayness and being with others are easier to digest. In later life, Heidegger became uncertain about whether philosophy could clearly explain the truth of being or not. Michel Foucault, the mad lad who embraced communism and then abandoned it. But that's not what we are here to talk about, but that he was one of the most controversial philosophers of the post-World War era, as he gave rise to the queer theory. His main success came from the 1996 to 1984 when he wrote several of his masterpieces, including
Global
Discipline and
recruitment
Punish,
is
The Order
available
of
to
Things,
boost your
and The
armies
History of
far from
Sexuality.
home, my lord.
Foucault
Yet
explored
such
the contingency of
flexibility comes
history
at a
to create a
price.
genealogy of
Build
power.
your
He
forces
questioned
close to
how
home
knowledge and
where
power
possible.
merged in practice. For
Alright,
example, in regulation of governing bodies and formation of self. He further discussed how one is governed and controlled by the development of knowledge over history, what he named as the technologies of power. In short, history is a play of
Here we go.
BDSM.
What the fuck?
Level 3. Friedrich Nietzsche. I know what the first comment on this video will be. Oh, Nietzsche should be higher. Well, deal
That's
with
true.
it. Nietzsche had a short but a brilliant tenure of writing, as insanity literally took the best out of him. He mostly wrote on the individuality and morality in the contemporary civilization, but specifically taught an individual through creative drive and will to power could become Übermensch, basically a person who pursues to exist beyond traditional values of good and evil. The idea comes from Thus Spoke Zarathustra, where Zarathustra brings the message to the people,
Relations with
but is
foreign
laughed
powers
at.
may be
That was sad,
managed through
but what is
diplomacy,
sadder
my
are the
lord.
people who call themselves
Consider
deep
your
thinker by
situation
quoting,
carefully
God is dead,
before
and we
accepting
killed
any
him.
agreement.
Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of the pessimist who inspired Nietzsche. He was primarily significant due to his metaphysical doctrine of the will put up against the Hegelian idealism. Schopenhauer mixed Hindu Vedas with Plato and Kant in order to create his own philosophy. His fundamental work was The World as Will and Idea, which was made into 4 books over the theory of knowledge, the philosophy of nature, aesthetics, and ethics. In the first 2, he discussed how man made the world comprehensible through the creation of space, time, and causality. But these creations only showed world externally, but not a thing in itself.
How's
He
it
further
going?
discussed how person's will is
Oh,
the thing in
shit.
itself which exists beyond
I got a
space
ship,
and time.
bro.
Man is driven by the restless desires and faces chain of struggles and
The
misery,
princes
which
of
at end
Calidor have
faces
had
death.
much success
Consequently,
in
the will to
finding
live is
wave
challenged,
fragments
thus
around
posing
the
a question to
volcano.
everyone.
Yet
Have
they
you had
refuse
enough?
to contribute to the effort
René
of
Descartes.
stabilizing the vortex.
Descartes.
Another man makes
Making
life an
war
agony
amongst your
through
own
math,
kind
but
is
rather not
I
think
unhealthy.
think,
about it.
therefore I am.
But an
Descartes in Discourse
occupation
on
of the
Method
city
argues
may be
about the
necessary
foundation of knowledge,
to
the
secure the
existence
wave
of God,
fragments
and
uncovered
distinguished
there.
between the body and the soul. Him being a mathematician resulted in him coming up with a method of doubt in order to gain specific
Troops
knowledge.
may be
Descartes
exchanged
argued that
between
even if
armies
sensory
in the field
experiences
if
were
necessary.
deceiving us, even then
Have
we
your
can reach
forces
certain
rendezvous
knowledge, knowing
in
that we
order
were
to
thinking.
transfer
Thus his
warriors
quotation,
between them.
I think,
Then let the
therefore I
wars
am.
continue.
He did not try to establish whether the world or the external body was real, but tried to reveal how we can gain certain insight about the world. Now the only rationalist left is Spinoza, but the chart maker did not include him, so better to skip another mathematical journey. Yay! Yeah, I'm pretty gassed about it, as you can see.
Champion of the Ever Queen.
Man.
John Locke. He
Oh,
brought
John
the fresh air
Locke,
to the ending
fucking
world of Middle Ages. He was
liberalism.
the leading figure of the Age of Enlightenment, and in process ended up laying foundations for the
As your lady.
liberalism, being a key advocate of empirical approach. Thus in his work, Essay Concerning
Faithful
Human
servant.
Understanding, he proposed the
command.
theory of tabula rasa, where a mind at birth is a blank page,
Protector
but through
of
sensory
Elfwan.
experiences, one gains knowledge. His political philosophy was of huge impact on coming authorities, as in 2 treaties of government. He stated that king had no divine right, thus should be removed once a society agrees to do so. He also stated the 3 natural rights of the man, which were life, liberty and property, ultimately influencing the founding constitution of America. Looks like Americans have someone to thank
Their
to.
demands.
Edmund Husserl.
I don't know who
You've
this
heard
is.
about the phenomenology. Well, this is the guy who found it. Got it? Nice. Husserl tried to resolve the opposition between rationalism and empiricism. Thus in his work, Ideas, General Introduction to Phenomenology, he tried to bring a new style to the transcendental philosophy and tried to improve on Kant's mediation on empiricism
just
and
reward.
rationalism. Husserl
The
came to
enemy
focus
have
on the basic
encircled your
experiences,
city, my lord.
which led to the essence
Oh,
of
Send a
things,
force
while
to
he
aid the
also
city
focused on how an
defenders
essence
before they
became
are starved into
consciousness. His
submission.
efforts were misunderstood by many, thinking that he was just copying Kant, but he later on proved everyone
Ever
wrong
vigilant.
by clearing the misunderstanding in his book Formal and Transcendental Logic.
Absolutely not.
Husserl be like, later on
These
suckers.
orders are unwise.
Ludwig Wittgenstein. He contributed hugely to the 20th century's
Princess of
philosophical
the Azores.
conversation, but
What
most
madness is
importantly,
this?
he was the mad lad who debunked the theories he himself came up with.
No.
For example, in treatises on logic
Why
and
will
philosophy,
they not
he
go
came
there?
up with a representational theory of language, where he described the world as a collection of facts, which we
Can't
can
get them
picture
to
in
go there.
language, assuming that language was
They're just
logically
like,
based.
bitch
But he
made,
took
bro.
a turn in the philosophical investigations
Prince
where he
of
saw the
Elfwan.
language not as fixed, but
Not by
fluid
my
structure, changing with
Uh-oh.
our daily life. Thus,
I
language
guess.
was not logically based, but rather how we used
How am
it.
I supposed to do that?
Maybe it is easy to understand this in his own words. He says, "It ain't what you say, it's the way that you say it, and the context in which
Ready
you say
to
it.
serve.
Words are how you use them." Level 4.
Protector of the Everqueen. I cannot.
Soren Kierkegaard. One
Not
cannot be
possible. You
existentialist
cannot
and
ask
devoted
this
to religion. But Kierkegaard seemed to reject such a statement. He was brought up in a confused household, with his father impregnating his maid and then marrying her after his first
Why won't
wife's
they
death.
move? What
Well,
the fuck?
now I get it why Kierkegaard was such an oddball. He opposed Hegelianism of his day, disagreeing with the lack of individual worth. Thus he placed individuality at the center of his own philosophy. He believed man stood alone in isolation, and for him to believe in an unknowable God, he needs to take the leap of faith. In his book Stages on Life's Way, he provided 3 types of existence, which included the aesthetic, ethical, and religious.
Dismiss all advances.
Bertrand
and-
Russell.
Before
He was a
ending.
British polymath, philosopher, logician, mathematician,
Your treasury is
historian,
running dry,
writer,
my lord.
social activist,
Soon you
political
will be out
activist,
of
and
coin.
Nobel laureate.
Take act.
But what is the nerdiest thing
A
about him
vigil
is
on
that he fell
expenditure
in love
must
with
be
Euclidean
maintained for your
geometry at
domain
age
to
11.
prosper.
What a
Be
nerd!
sure to
He
keep a
developed
close
classical
watch on
logic
your
and principle of
finances,
mathematics.
lest
He
ruin
wrote how math
overtakes
was a
you.
branch of logic,
Oh.
stating if all mathematical terms could be well defined, then truth or falsity of each statement can be evaluated through pure logic. He also developed logical atomism alongside his student Ludwig Wittgenstein. Surprise, surprise. He also tried to improve Aristotle's syllogisms by adding some seasoning of Boolean algebra. Now what the fuck is Boolean algebra, you ask? Well, search it online, I'm not a maths channel. Sigmund Freud. He's regarded as one of the most influential yet controversial minds of the
Sigmund
20th
Freud
century.
is such a fucking
His
whack
most
job,
important
bro.
development was the psychoanalysis, a practice to treat an individual with mental illness. He developed the
He
theory
wanted to
of
fuck his
unconsciousness, which presents that big chunk of human
Weirdo.
behaviors can be explained through the activity of the mind, which isn't clearly visible. The unusual attitude can be explained through the observation. For example,
And
small
not only
slips
did
of
he
tongue
just
and
wanna fuck
dreams
his
can
mom,
be
he thought
interpreted
everybody
as
wanted to
doorway
fuck
to
their moms.
unconscious mind.
Servant of
Thus,
the king.
this gives rise to the idea that humans do not
Shield
act
against the
accordingly to
darkness.
their will, but functions on the processes running
No
in the
mercy.
background. There's a lot to say about his works, but the time restricts such ability. Gilles Deleuze. Yes, as cliché as it sounds, he's another French philosopher from the 20th century. In his early days, he wrote about David Hume's and Nietzsche
Yeah.
to highlight the contrast between both of them. Through this comparison, he exhibited the
ancestors
limit
will
of
be
human
proud.
reason and mocked traditional philosophy, which tries to find the ultimate nature of reality. He further criticized in other works that traditional metaphysics had a tree-like character, where reality is visualized in terms of hierarchy, order, and linearity. Thus he came up with his own concept of rhizome, and underground growth which grew aimlessly and disorderly. In his major publication in collab with Felix Guattari, called Anti-Oedipus, was a critique of
Wow,
psychoanalysis
this is,
and concept of Oedipus, discussing that these concepts were designed to suppress human desire and create normalization. Thus they portray schizophrenia as a heroic expression of non-social conformity. Looks like discussing Freud kinda came in handy, eh? Samuel Beckett. An Irishman and a philosopher entered the pub. Yup, that's the joke. Well, at least Beckett was a master of humor, unlike me. Most of his idiosyncratic works offered a bleak outlook on existence and experience,
I'm gonna break
with
the
some
peace
good old
treaty
dark
like
humor.
immediately.
He saw superficial aspects of life as cover
Winds
to
of
basic
magic
anguish of
blow
human
across the
condition.
land, my lord.
Who are we?
Those who
What
can
is the true
harness it
nature of the self?
gain access to
What does the
formidable
word
power.
I mean? In his play Waiting for Godot, his main heroes are in the most basic situation of being in the world and not knowing what they are there for. But as a human is rational, they cannot just assume that they are there for nothing. Thus, coming to the conclusion that they are there waiting for someone named Godot, without knowing whether he exists or not. Cool. Another existential crisis. Max Stirner. He was a German philosopher and a social critic, best known for writing Ego and His Own. in which he described human as a self-interested ego. Thus, each individual should be able to express their individuality without any restrictions. Sounds pretty sus when you work as a teacher at a girls' school. Okay, I should stop making assumptions. In his work, he further writes how a person is in the center of his own moral universe. Thus, actions a person takes will be considered as his self-mastery. He declared that I am my own. When I am a master of myself instead of being mastered by anything else. Thus he came up with the term
Quit sending me
ownness.
offers, bro.
This leads to the idea of individualist
Don't want
anarchism, where no sovereign authority, such as government or church, can stop a human to pursue his own individual self-interest. He died after getting stung on the neck by an insect. Seemed like insect also wanted to express its individuality. Level 5.
No, I don't want to piece with them.
Diogenes.
I want to fight the midgets, bro.
We start with the original Mad Lad, who once said, I pissed on a man who called me a
Oh,
dog.
Diogenes.
Why was he surprised? He was one of the cynics who stressed stoic self-sufficiency and rejected luxuries of life. In further detail, he did not just disregard luxuries, but also laws and customs of conventional societies. He himself lived in extreme poverty with little or no belongings to show that one can find happiness even under such circumstances. Such happiness wasn't found anywhere
Bro, I'm
but
broke.
created within oneself. His second principle, shamelessness, meant that one can perform acts that disregarded social conventions in every situation. So next time when you have a family dinner, give yourself a quick wank in front of everyone to show that you hold the knowledge of the absolute Mad Lad. Julius Evola. When you hear someone called a most radical, anti-democratic, anti-liberal, anti-egalitarian, and anti-popular political philosopher, then he's Evola. He was mystic who believed in tantra, hermeticism, and ritual magic. But I'm not interested in what he believed, but what he philosophizes. He came up with an idea called magical idealism. His early works tried to convert neo-idealism from a philosophy of absolute spirit and mind to the philosophy of absolute individual and action. He stated that the ego must understand that everything that seems to have a reality independent of it is nothing but an illusion caused by its own deficiency, which meant one needed to become the absolute individual to gain the unconstrained liberty and unconditional power. Unsurprisingly, he was also an advocate of no-fab, a definite incel. Jacques Lacan. He was the man who introduced the Freudian theory into France during the 1930s, but gained the much needed attention in the later stages of his career, which was in the 1960s when he published his essays and lectures in Écrits.
I need to figure out how to make more money.
He emphasized that language was an essential part of
right
the
now,
unconscious, thus introducing the language element in psychoanalytical theory. One of his famous concepts was the three orders of Lacan, which were the imaginary, symbolic, and the real. This idea's clearest description was given by Zizek in an analogy of a chess game, where the rules of chess through which the game functions are the symbolic. The chess pieces which are given a shape and names are the imaginary, and the intrusion of my cat while I play chess, which is the contingent circumstances being outside the game, are the real. Lacan is overly complex, so let's move on. George Edward Moore. Not the footballer, but quite the realist philosopher who took a systematic approach to ethical problems. His time at Cambridge was defined by the journal articles he wrote, which included the nature of judgment and the refutation of idealism, plus the major ethical work, Principia Ethica, which tried to give ethics a better foundation.
I actually wanted to read that book.
Thus these writings together helped him disestablish the influence of Hegel and Kant over English philosophy. His ethical intuitionism also contributed to moral relativism, where he claimed that what is good requires analysis of the desired and approval, which are not inherently related to ethics. Consequently, a fallacy occurs, which he named naturalistic fallacy.
I think I'm gonna lose this battle.
Wait a minute, I thought he was an economist. Oh, I just learned that he contributed to the areas of philosophy of science, the free will problem,
Friedrich
and
Hayek.
epistemology. Fair enough, fair enough. Skipping most of his economic work, I will jump to the 1940s, when he worked on his Abuse of Reason project. It was a critique of several doctrines that he merged together, labeling it as scientism, which he defined as the slavish imitation of method and language
Bro,
of
why
science,
the fuck?
used where the natural sciences could not be used. The same idea led him to write his two major works, which were The Road to Circle and The Sensory Order. While in his political
troops
philosophy
will
side
fire
of
at
things,
will
he
without orders
criticized
to the contrary,
socialism over
Commander.
its restrictions
Have
of the
them
free
conserve
market
their
and defended the
ammunition, if you so
liberalistic
wish.
approaches to the market. Well, a free market is the reason why GameStop's share skyrocketed. Jack Derrida. There are so many influential French philosophers that you can make a football team out of them. Derrida is also part of the team, being a critic of Western philosophy and an analytic of nature of language. He is most celebrated for coining the term deconstruction, which was used in the critical examination of Western philosophy since the times of ancient Greeks. Deconstruction is an approach to breaking down complex concepts and understanding the meaning between the relationship of text and meaning. For example, one can read a novel twice over its lifetime and each time interpret the meaning of the text differently. Derrida in his other works such as Writing and Difference and Speech and Phenomena explored how Edmund Husserl, Rousseau and other philosophers treated writing. Although many people complained about his incomprehensible writings, but oh well, they small brain.
They small brain.
Keep the ball. Oh, he is my guy, said no one ever. Hey. Anyhow, aside the puns, he was a Marxist theorist and a filmmaker, a unique combination I might say. His renowned works included The Society of the Spectacle and several autobiographies. Debord was greatly irritated by the hegemony of the government and media over everyday life through mass production and consumption. He wrote that the pop culture, mass media and advertisement in shape of images controlled the social relation between people, thus he called the phenomena the spectacle. He developed notions of fetishism of the commodity further along with the analysis of spectacleist society. Guy Debord actively organized Situationist International, a political
this guy
movement
up.
attempting to create a class struggle against the spectacle. Although the political movement was dissolved in 1972, so he instead continued to make abstract-ass films. Alexander Dugin, the first person that is alive on this list. Amazing! And what's furthermore, he's called the Putin's Rasputin. Dugin posed the geopolitical concept of design. Through such basis, he claims that the liberal capitalist West is the complete opposite of what the ancient Greek idealized, thus the revolt of earth against the heavens. Instead, he envisions the unification of all Russian-speaking countries to create the Eurasian Empire, which would be capable of fighting the US-led Western world. In the basics of geopolitics, he writes, in principle, Eurasia and/or space, the heartland Russia, remain the staging area of anti-bourgeois, anti-American revolution. The new Eurasian Empire will be constructed on the fundamental principle of the common enemy, the rejection of Atlanticism, strategic control of the USA, and a refusal to allow liberal values to dominate us. This common civilizational impulse will be the basis of political and strategic union. Level 6. Reza. Well, due to family-friendly content, I shall not say his last name. He has contributed to research journals such as Collapse, C-Theory, but mainly he is associated with speculative realism and rationalist universalism, which covers the beginning of evolution of modern system of knowledge and advancing towards contemporary philosophies of rationalism. After that, he turned to rationalist inhumanism, according to which concept of human is underexplored. Thus further investigation will lead to a new concept of human that stands opposite to the concept of human essentialism and humanism. In his research, he deals with philosophy of intelligence, AI and neuroscience, and questions what is intelligence. Well, my answer to him is that intelligence is something I lack. Thomas Metzinger. More like Metzinger Burger. Okay, please forgive me. He is a German philosopher active since the 1990s in the promotion of consciousness studies as an academic endeavor. His book, Being No One and Ego-Eternal, argues that self does not exist. It is only a model created by our brain. Everything we experience is a virtual self in a virtual reality. The only self which does exist is the phenomenal self of conscious experience. The book further questions whether we still have souls, free will, or accountability. Metzinger disagrees with the hard problem of consciousness, which explains how we have qualia or phenomenal experiences. He denies that qualia actually exists through logical backing and use of proper neuroscience. I don't know his arguments yet, but going through his works will indeed give me some interesting insight.
I might actually win this.
Rene Quino, also known as Abdul Wahid Jahia, who was also influential in the doctrine of metaphysics. He seems interesting in the fact that he proposed an individual to apply directly some aspects of Eastern philosophy into their lives while keeping faithful to their spirit. In his first published book, An Introduction to the Study of Hindu Doctrines, he points out that misinterpretation of Western Orientalism and Neo-Capitalism and gives a rigorous explanation of Eastern metaphysics. Renegino's work is usually divided into 4 parts, that being fundamental metaphysics principles, initiation and esotericism, studies in symbolism, and criticism of the modern world and neo-spiritualism. For him, symbolism held an essential and spontaneous echoing power. Symbolism was a metaphysical language at its highest, thus capable of relating all degrees of universal manifestation and the components of being. Thomas Ligotti. He was influenced by H.P. Lovecraft. Well, looks like things are about to get dark then. Thomas Ligotti is a contemporary horror writer, but also known for his pessimistic and nihilistic world outlook. His non-fiction work, The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, is a philosophical take on the horror of the real and the dread of self. He describes the relationship between the structure of experience and real merged together.
Sick.
To create an experience of the real, but then turning the real world inside out to show that it was unreal all along. Interestingly, Ligotti follows Thomas Metzinger's philosophy of consciousness, where humans are not selves, but a self-model. Thus Ligotti comes to describe the Plato's cave as an organism, where the projections on the wall are the human's consciousness. The projections are there, but the cave itself is empty. Thank you for the third existential crisis. Slavoj Žižek.
I watched a...
Wait a minute, he's not as obscure though. Well, all the people who know about him think in that manner at least. Okay, I should stop before the salt comes my way. Anyhow, he is a Slovenian philosopher and a cultural theorist who was made renowned through his provocative yet humorous style. His first work in English, The Sublime Object of Ideology, was considered a masterpiece which was mostly a critique of the notion that one can escape ideology and independently live without it. Zizek writes that Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud both had found the kernel of meaning within unconnected forms of commodities and dreams, but in reality both did not hold any hidden value or meaning. He also rejected deconstruction of Derrida and postmodernism of Lyotard, ultimately seeing them as a manifestation of commodification and homogeneity of culture under global capitalism. Okay, before moving on, I want to share one of Zizek's jokes. He says, "Throw out this destitute beggar. I'm so sensitive that I can't see people suffering." Level 7. Edward von Hartmann, the philosopher of the unconscious. Damn, what a name he got. This mad lad tried to reconcile the opposing school of thoughts, rationalism and irrationalism, through the concept of the unconscious mind. This was done in his book, The Philosophy of Unconscious. Hartmann's idea was based on the single phenomena, which obviously was human unconsciousness, which evolved through 3 stages. The first stage is where the will and reason were united as the absolute spiritual principle of existence, but then they were separated when the man had his fall. The second stage was called the cosmic, in which consciousness led human to chase happiness. The human currently lives in this stage where the will and the reason compete, thus making life a misery. Once the misery reaches its maximal limit, then the man shall reach the third stage, where the reason defeats the will. Human will have temptation for suicide, but this will be overcome by rational thinking. He finally writes, that human needs to devote to social evolution instead of chasing the dreams of happiness that he will never reach. I break my impartiality to call this philosophy just beautiful. Quentin Meillassoux. Okay, I'm done with butchering names, or maybe not, as this guy was a student of Alain Badiou, who wrote the foreword for his first book, After Finitude. It comes up with a new option regarding Immanuel Kant's three alternatives of criticism, skepticism, and dogmatism. He argues that post-Kantian philosophy is dominated by correlationism. The statement that defined correlationism being, humans cannot exist within the world, nor world without humans. He argues that avoiding such concept creates problem of describing the world which is prior to all human access. To solve the issue, he suggests that mathematics is the only way to reach the primary qualities of things, instead of the secondary qualities that we experience instead.
Oh, there we go.
Well, I'm out of here if math is the only way to solve my problems. Peter Singer. The guy was once titled as the most dangerous man in the world. But look at this smile. Does he look teeny bit dangerous at all? He's an Australian-born ethical political philosopher who is best known for his bioethics and animal rights movements. Singer's works are mostly around the ethics and political activism led by the utilitarianist philosophy, thus promoting happiness and preventing pain. He argued that the moral obligation does not limit to the duty, but charity, as well as any action, becomes a duty if it prevents more pain and causes more happiness. In the publication of Animal Liberation, he brought attention to animal rights and stated that all beings with interest deserve to have their interest taken into account when making a moral decision. But man, that smile still makes me happy. Herman Tonnesen. This guy barely has any articles on him. On top, he's Norwegian, thus making things even harder. The only accessible essay of his is called Happiness is for Pigs. He tried to be the better version of Zappa, another fellow Norwegian philosopher. He went against the metaphysical statement that life is meaningless by replacing it with that life is not even meaningless. He writes that we live a life worthy of an authentic man, even when we are aware that this is an illusion, a self-deception, where man is nothing but an intelligent pig with a sense of cleanliness and indoor plumbing. Well, I beg to differ, because pigs cannot really create means. Checkmate, bruh. Petter Vessel Zappa. Well, here comes another Norwegian with a difficult name. The philosopher who the last guy was obsessed with. As we already know that he had a pessimistic view of human life and was a supporter of antinatalism, which in short was a philosophy where you abstain from giving birth.
What a piece of shit,
Oh well,
bro.
he views that humans are too overdeveloped, which doesn't fit with nature's design. Thus humans tend to search for satisfaction and justification for matters over life and death. Ultimately, humans try not to be human by going against the nature, thus a paradox. In Last Messiah, he gives 4 points through which man tries to avoid this paradox. 1. Isolation. One isolates itself from the consciousness of destructive thought or feeling. 2. Anchoring. One anchors itself to society, religion, and morality. 3. Distraction. One distracts itself by focusing on a specific task. 4. Sublimation. One sublimates the negative energy towards something more positive. Well, there goes my sanity. Woodard? Seriously, who is this? I found few people call this, but no one who stood out. I'm sorry to any Woodards who are watching this though. Lovelate. Marcion of Sinope. To start, we go as back to the 85. Yup, just 85 AD. I'm not gonna go in detail of what he did or said because he's connected more to the theological world rather philosophical. The basis of his thought was that there were two cosmic gods, one who demanded justice and created the man, body and the soul, while the other god, having no relation to the first god, sent Jesus Christ to save man from materialism.
Wait, what
Well,
is this?
this was today's dose of wacky theology. Julio Cabrera, a philosopher from South America. Seems like we are getting real international here. Julio has largely played a contribution through his work on negative ethics. In his book A Critique of Affirmative Morality, where he criticizes normative ethical system which considers life and existence are intrinsically good. He argues that life is structurally bad, instead thus one can never lead a good life. In short, he thinks that to live is to be immoral. He also, being an antinatalist, argues that procreation is an act of manipulation and harm, as children are created due to their aesthetical value, thus not for their own sake, but for the sake of their parents.
More money.
Well, I think I did not even fulfill my aesthetical duty. Makes sense why I am a disappointment. David Benatar. Seems like many people nowadays regret their own birth, as Benatar is also an antinatalist.
yeah,
I mean,
I
it is
know
pretty
about
clear
this
from the
guy.
title of his book, Better Never to Have Been, the harm of coming into existence. He argues from the premises that pain is a bad thing. Thus the argument follows that 1. Presence of pain is bad. 2. Presence of pleasure is good. 3. The absence of pain is good, even if that good cannot be experienced. 4. The absence of good is not bad unless there is somebody deprived of it. As bringing someone into existence generates both good and bad experiences, while not existing generates no pain and pleasure, thus from asymmetry of good and bad, that it is better for one not to be born. Cool. Maqueda Sada. If you were wondering where the word sadism originated from, well, here's the guy who popularized it. But my god, his life is one hella adventure. I don't want YouTube to be angry, so I shall refrain from talking about it here. While he was in jail, he wrote erotic novels to overcome his boredom. And anger. These works had an elemental philosophical discourse with sexual fantasies, violence and suffering. De Sada was a proponent of absolute freedom, unconstrained by morality, religion or law. His writings and his own life were famous for libertinism, where it states that one is devoid of most moral principles, sense of responsibility or sexual restraints, thus being a radical form of hedonism, where pleasures experienced through senses are of utmost importance. Now this is a philosophy I can get behind at least.
Sounds like the
No
dumbest
puns intended.
philosophy ever.
Ryunosuke Kutagawa. He's the most widely translated Japanese writer and even inspired legendary director Akira Kurosawa.
I think
He
I've
was
heard about
popularized
this guy.
in West for his short stories, which consisted of human dilemmas and struggles of conscience. Kutagawa in Rashomon wrote a tale of
Yeah,
encounter
I have.
between a servant and an old
PewDiePie
woman
talks
who
about
weaved
him.
wigs from dead corpses. This depicted the world's survivalism and short-term morality for self-preservation. He was heavily influenced by European fiction and philosophy, especially by Franz Kafka. After the age of 25, he developed hints of madness and will to die. His writings began to show increasing self-observation as he wrote his prophetic essay called What is Proletariat Literature, which pondered the future of art. At age 35, he ended his life by poisoning, but before dying, he wrote a letter called A Note to a Certain Friend, where he described his disinterest with life and his anticipation of peace with death. Osamu Dazai. Another Japanese author who drowned himself with his lover. At least his work survived, from which No Longer Human is most popular outside Japan. This novel and others were semi-autographical, giving insight into his unstable life. His pessimism made him resemble Camus, but unlike Camus, who was focused on politics and philosophy, Dazai focused on personal reflections of estrangements. This estrangement was not only from the society, but an idea of human being estranged from being human, and consequently from existence. His characters at each stage of the novel tend to become more confused and bewildered, finding them to become older but not wiser. His main question was whether being human was not a solution, but instead a problem. The book No Longer Human ends where human is disqualified from being human,
Oh, this
to
book
become
is
a
really fucked
non-entity
up.
that is not part of the society, but
This
drawn
book
to
is
the
really
unhuman
fucked
world
up.
of sky, rain, sand,
It's
and
really
sea.
sad too.
Philip Mindlander. Well, here we go
Should
to
I
the
do
deepest
it
of
just to
abyss,
see what
where a
happens?
philosopher such as he
Last
was
time I
born
won
in
when it said that I
1841 through
wasn't
marital
going to,
rape.
so maybe I should try
It is no wonder why he is known as the most radical pessimist. He proclaimed that will ignited by the knowledge that not being is better than being is the supreme moral principle. He built his philosophy around the same metaphysical framework of Schopenhauer. But what differentiated him was silencing the will. For Mindlander, the cosmos was moving to silence the will to live, which he called the redemption. In his book The Philosophy of Salvation, he writes about how the world was a singularity, a single will which was dispersed into individual wills. When this individual will die out, then the redemption is received in the form of absolute nothingness. Due to such basis, the will to live thus becomes will to die. He further justifies why the will to die is best for the happiness of all, through the realization that all pursuit and craving leads to pain. Now my mission to bring you to the deepest layer of the philosophers is complete. But before I go back into my cave of illusion, I want to share Mindlander's quotation from the Philosophy of Redemption. But at the bottom, the immanent philosopher sees in the entire universe only the deepest longing for absolute annihilation. And it is as if he clearly hears the call that permeates all spheres of heaven. Redemption, redemption, that too over life. And the comforting answer, you will all find annihilation and be redeemed.
I have to disband some of my units. Wait, no, not recruit. Which units should I disband?
Oh, what? Has your name always been Hulu Has Live Sports?
I guess so.
New names, amen. Meet Jalen, Hulu has live sports.
Hulu Plus Live TV, your favorite place to watch live TV.
Protector of the Everqueen.
As I'm in the midst of applying for residency right now, wish me luck, Grammarly has again been a lifesaver with my application in helping me write my personal statement and CV. Grammarly is your digital writing assistant. It's an all-in-one tool that improves your productivity, triple checks your work, and saves you time when working on multiple assignments. Even the free features are incredible. You can set your own writing goals, track your word count, and even find new words to replace your overused ones using the synonym feature. I personally love using Grammarly.
There we go.
Many people criticize philosophy as being disconnected from our daily existence. However, this critique is not new. It is in fact as old as philosophy itself. In the ancient Greek fable, the astrologer who fell into a well, Thales of Miletus, considered as the first philosopher, is said to have been so lost in thought that while gazing at the stars, he fell into a well. How should one have knowledge of the heavenly things above if one knows not what is beneath one's feet? In recent history, however, there have been several philosophical movements such as transcendentalism, pragmatism, and existentialism that turn away from abstract ideas to examine the world around us, towards an interest in our daily life and occupations, with hopes to gain insights into the complexities of the human condition. We will be exploring the works of a little-known but unique thinker, the Russian Jewish existentialist philosopher Lev Shevstov, known for his philosophy of despair or philosophy of tragedy. Shevstov's lack of recognition is, however, hardly surprising. Whatever insights he had acquired could not be transmitted by intellectual processes to others, but only by going through the same kind of intensive and personal struggle in one's life. Shortly after his death, his friend Nikolai Berdyaev, himself a religious existentialist, wrote that Lev Shevstov was a philosopher who philosophized with his whole being, for whom philosophy was not an academic specialty but a matter of life and death. For Shestov, the sources of philosophy were the human tragedy, the horrors and sufferings of human life, and the sense of hopelessness. An inner development almost always requires going through suffering. One must, therefore, include one's existential experience in one's philosophy, and this cannot be done by reason alone. Shestov agrees with Nietzsche that every great philosophy is a confession and unconscious autobiography of the deepest kind. Shestov underwent what he calls a pilgrimage through the souls of the great minds. He encountered the writings of the great Danish thinker Kierkegaard, in whom he found a kindred spirit. He also held Nietzsche as his hero, as well as Dostoevsky. Shestov was the first person to link these existentialists together, seeing the greatness of them in their deep probing into the question of the meaning of life and the problems of human suffering, evil and death, united by the essential tragedy of human life. Nevertheless, Shestov is a thinker in his own right. In his first original work, All Things Are Possible, or as in the original title, The Apotheosis of Groundlessness, Shestov explores something that we all experience at one moment in our lives. It is what he calls groundlessness, the uncertainty of our experience of the world. It speaks to those who lived through a tragedy and felt at a certain point in their life that everything was falling apart, that the ground gave way under their feet. Shestov believes that if rational thought were to be used in every sphere of life, reason would corrode man's ability to connect to a more spiritual realm. His keen analysis of the malaise of modern man is more important than ever in our depersonalized society, struggling for meaning and purpose in life. Shestov undertook a vast critique of the history of Western philosophy, beginning with the ancient Greeks, which he saw as a battle between reason and faith. Like Nietzsche, Shestov's philosophy offers no systematic unity, for no theory can solve the mysteries of life. The culmination of his lifetime intellectual inquiry is his final work, Athens and Jerusalem, an attempt at a religious philosophy, exploring the philosophy of religion from an existentialist perspective. He observed that the tragedy of human existence does not conform to materialistic systems of thinking. Athens stands for reason, while Jerusalem stands for faith, and the two are mutually exclusive. He abhorred the rationalization of religion of Western philosophy, arguing that God is beyond rational comprehension and morality. He criticizes both Kant, who believed that religion is within the limits of reason alone, and Hegel, with his famous proclamation that what is rational is real and what is real is rational. In both, abstractions predominate and ignore the fundamental questions of life. Shestov's philosophy is a form of anti-rationalism, but he's not opposed to scientific knowledge or reason in everyday life. This was not his problem. He was opposed to the pretensions of scientism and rationalism, the evil twins in modern society, who consider themselves as the omniscient God who limits man's possibilities and the liberation from the tragic horrors of human fate. Life simply becomes a mathematical formula to be solved. As Dostoevsky writes, human nature is not taken into account. It is excluded. It is not supposed to exist. They believe that a social system that has come out of some mathematical brain is going to organize all humanity at once and make it just and sinless in an instant, quicker than any living process. Faith, on the other hand, is concerned with finding the truth in God. Shestov shares Kierkegaard's view that faith is the only way to free oneself from the despair born out of one's groundlessness. Thus, spiritual development is bound to progress through a state of sickness. For Shestov, philosophy is not pure thinking, but some kind of inner doing, inner regeneration or second birth. Tragedies take place in the depth of the human soul, where no eye can reach out to see. Consequently, he saw the beginning of philosophy start.
Alright, I'm done for the day. Oh man, what the hell? There's like a big red mark on my neck. Huh. I had like a rash on my chest earlier today from I don't know what, but yeah. So I'm done. I'll probably stream a lot longer tomorrow. I'll probably get into talking about the FBI declaring Trump supporters and MAGA supporters as like a terrorist group or like extremist violent group. And yeah, so but I'm done for today. I'm tired. I'll see you guys later. Deuces.